Unleash the power of your training. Welcome to Unleash the Powers of Your LMS. Here are your hosts, Lee Wedgeworth and Joshua De La Vega.
Thanks for being here. I'm Lee Wedgeworth, VP of IT here at Tortal Training. Joining me today is Senior Engineer, Lead Developer, the lovely and talented Mr. Joshua De La Vega. Welcome, Josh.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Lee. You're so kind. Those words are too kind.
Thank you for being here, sir.
Glad to be here.
Today, the question is, how do we unleash a powerful LMS? The theme of our Learning Summit this year is unleashing the power of training. We don't have to talk about the C word specifically, but I think mainly because of that, more than anything else, most anyone in the learning space can tell you that over the last year and a half, there has been so many more pivots and trend shifts in learning, mainly online learning, than in the last 10 years, probably put together all at once. So with all these emerging trends and these new developments, new requirements, old developments that just keep turning up and won't go away, what is our strategy? How are we going to navigate this? How are we going to unleash a powerful LMS, whether it be Tortal's LMS or some lesser LMS that you may have the misfortune of having engaged? So we did contemplate doing a longer session here to cover all of the relevant trends in the space, but of course our time is limited, so we boiled them down to three. And those three are instructor-led training, becoming virtual instructor-led training, a massive shift there. As the landscape of accessibility and technology changed. The use of machine learning and artificial intelligence to enhance LMS tasks, another big one that we'll cover. And then finally, virtual onboarding. Onboarding, a necessary part of all business processes. Everybody does it, everybody hates it, and there's ways to unleash power even around that task. So let's go ahead and begin at the beginning with instructor-led training. In this case, ILT shifting to VILT. The reason for this is multifaceted, but a lot of it has to do with more people working from home. Funny how that works when you really don't have any say in the matter. Going forward, more people wanting to work from home or seeking that as one of the options of the job, right? So a lot of people got their first real taste of working from home over the last year and a half, and now they want more. And this is a good thing in a lot of ways because it can help reduce overhead. It can reduce travel time, which results in more safety and so on. And, if you're in a city like Atlanta, like I am, where traffic is our middle name, then, working at home starts to look pretty good for many, many reasons. Traditional classroom training, moving to virtual environments. Again, physical access, carries with it a lot of logistical challenges that you just don't have online. So we find ourselves moving to more highly customizable virtual training environments with new flexibility and new options that are kind of, indirectly and directly resulting from all these emerging trends. Right, so Josh, we have covered the trends. We've got a good understanding of what it is. So maybe you can help us understand how to unleash some power around this particular trend.
Of course, Lee, and I'll concentrate on how we have approached these trends from the Tortal LMS standpoint. But all of this applies to any LMS that you might have that needs to be moving in this direction because the world is moving in this direction. Your training should be moving in this direction. So for virtual instructor-led training, the first thing we have done is we have revamped our process. The Tortal LMS had an ILT section or process already in place, but we found out that it was cumbersome and it did not allow for an easy integration with the other components of our LMS. So to make it really virtual, what we have done is we have revamped it. We have treated instructor-led training to be as another or different kind of what we call in our LMS learning object. So by treating it as another learning object, we can list it as another learning object. We can allow the people that are setting these learning objects to easily navigate through them, easily sort, filter, etc. what's important to note is that we have kept the same idea of ILT, in which you can still manage your sessions per learning object. In those sessions, you can manage who is assigned to them. You can manage the attendance and the scores. So basically, it's just a change on how to navigate through instructor-led training. And in addition to that, we have added the possibility of different types of sessions in the learning object and the virtual IoT. Um, and the way to do that is we just choose, right? What type of session do you want to add to the learning object and which date? Do you want it to be a Zoom meeting? Do you want it to be a WebEx training? And from there, the system takes care of making all the necessary connections with the third party service to create a session in your IoT. And how that works is basically the learner will get a link, an automatic link saying your Zoom meeting is in certain link at certain time. At that time, the LMS will open up the access for the learner to be able to access that Zoom meeting. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to do a seamless integration. Right now, we support Zoom and WebEx. Some of our clients are using WebEx very successfully. We have to say that different tools have different powerful features. In the case of Zoom, you have breakout rooms. In the case of WebEx, you have polls, you have moderation, you have a lot of users can sign in. Depending on your needs, these third-party tools can help you set up your meetings. And the LMS, in our case, the Tortal LMS, will help you create the link to these third-party tools so that you can integrate virtual training with your learners. So that's what we do. We've actually targeted this trend to make sure that we can have a virtual IoT that is easier to manage, easier to access, easier to assign, enroll users. You can also have your roster management. You can set dates. You can set scores. You can set completion. You can email attendees right from the LMS altogether. And there's obviously some other session settings, such as restricting enrollment, restricting people from going out of the sessions, session size, and all that entails. What we have done is we have paved the path, and we're working on, there's ongoing work to integrate additional tools. Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, Adobe Connect, GoToMeeting, and Skype are the big ones that we're looking into to integrate as we go along with virtual IoT and being able to make this trend a part of our LMS.
Right on. So immediate issues or immediate requirements being addressed with plans for the future to kind of expand the number of options. You mentioned that each of these tools kind of has their own advantages, pros and cons, I'm sure, and features and benefits of each tool. In your personal opinion, who's leading the pack these days, and who promises to lead the pack on down the road a little bit?
Well, there's definitely, that's a great question. There's definitely most of the market share is being driven by Zoom for virtual IoT and not virtual IoT, right? Zoom has proven to be a very lightweight meeting software that can accomplish what most people want to do. However, there have been talks about security in Zoom, how secure it is, how maybe it's not compliant with training departments. And in that respect, other training suites have come along, such as Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is experiencing exponential growth, especially because they not only have VILT, but it's a collaboration tool. And that's the trick. We want to integrate with all of these as much as we can to take advantage of how our clients are actually integrating their enterprise systems to these platforms. But I would say Zoom and WebEx are probably the most known in the training space. WebEx because of its specific training effort to create a training suite, right? They have a specific product called a training system. And Zoom because of it's just as easy to use.
Right. So powerful conferencing and webinar tools plus the LMS, that's the way to unleash the power in this one. Makes sense. All right. So let's move on to the next one. The next trend that we had identified that's worth talking about here in this context is the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence to enhance LMS tasks. So now when we think about machine learning, we think about artificial intelligence, I automatically think about robots from the future and the movies where the robots become self-aware. The Terminator, The Matrix, High School Musical. We know what happens when we go down the wrong road here, but it seems that we're not quite there yet. It seems that what we're really talking about here is not about enslaving the human race, but helping us make lives better through training, right? How can we use artificial intelligence and machine learning not to completely replace the work of people, but to replace tasks so that you free the humans and those valuable mental resources up to do more important strategic and tactical planning. So another important element of this trend is that more training data is available. So as we said, people are taking stuff online more than ever. There is more data available. So how can we use these machine learning and AI to help us make better use of this data so that we're not just getting more, but we're getting better data and it's better applied for better decision making with the help of technology. So we can make more sense out of it and provide more and relevant training. So Josh, how do we unleash it?
Well, this is a great topic. It can be scary, as you just mentioned, but it is a trend. It's here to stay. It's here to grow. So our approach, as with the Tortal LMS, is to embrace this in a series of phases. We have started by trying to create what in the industry we call a neural network. When you think neural, you think neurons, you think brain, and that's exactly it. We're trying to create an artificial brain from the Tortal LMS and all the data that it has. Because when you talk about machine learning, you need to know that we're talking about data. Data is the core on how we are going to structure a program to understand how to give out results and how to make your life better with reporting, how to make life better with maybe suggesting training. So what we're trying to do is with the data that we have stored for a multitude of years that the Tortal LMS has been working, we're cross-referencing that data to identify patterns. Maybe there are skills that some people need that are, we can't identify just with the results of a specific course, but we could identify with an aggregate of data that we can measure to know if there are, certain skills that need to be met, additional training programs that need to be sent. So through all this data, sentiment analysis included, that's the third point here, which basically says, how long did it take them to answer? What does it mean if they failed and they took 30 seconds to answer? Does that have some sort of meaning for us? Can we cross-reference that data to say performance is needed somewhere? With all these information that we're storing, we're trying to build this network of just neurons in our LMS that might give us more information. So we're in the very initial starting phases for this, but this is the way we're moving forward because this is the way we can help our administrators and our LMS users reduce the operative tasks and, like you said, concentrate on more strategic tasks as they create more training and training content. So one of the first things we're doing is we're using predictability. We're implementing more searching and filtering tools with predictable results of what has happened before, what has been searched before, maybe what is being searched the most in the LMS, and we're using that as well. That's basically the way that we've actually targeted this trend. And there's also another thing that we're doing. We have a tool already in the LMS that's called mForce. mForce is basically a way of suggesting additional training that might be needed by a learner to reinforce that learner's skills. So this tool basically grabs the score, it grabs the completion, pass or fail from the learner. It also looks at the different scoring and interactions that this learner had and suggests additional training based on what the administrator has set up in the LMS to suggest if the network or this programming that we've done suggests that this learner would need to be reinforced with certain things. So this is already implemented in our LMS. It takes the outcomes and suggests additional training. And this is the way we're starting to use this neural network that we're trying to create to make lives better, to make life more interesting. At the end of the day, what we want to do is be able to hit on those key performance indicators through the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence to let the administrator know, has your training been effective, and how effective has it been, and what else you would need to do from a metrics and from a technology standpoint. In addition to that, there's another component of all of this. And you might have heard this specific expression. It's XAPI. XAPI is a buzzword right now in training. And what it is, it stands for Experience API. It's just a way of using software to obtain more information from a learner interaction. So what I mean by that is right now, current training software, current training courses, learning objects give you limited information. They give you information as far as if the user passed or failed a learning object or a course, or if the user completed or did not complete. But when you use an Experience API enabled learning object or course, you can get more information. You could get more verbs. The actor would be a learner, and what they do is very important because you can know exactly what happened at certain part of your training. So things like, the user registered, or the user interacted or commented, or the user shared are very important things of their training that you can later group to understand how the user completed the training. So our effort and our ongoing effort has been on being able to track this information and be able to transfer this information to any of our clients' LRS. LRS stands for Learning Record Store. We would store this information in that Learning Record Store, and this Learning Record Store can interpret very powerful reports to tell administrators how users are doing training, how they're accomplishing their training, and what additional training they might need. As I said before, we're starting on this. We're in the initial phases. The idea is that the Tortal LMS becomes fully supportive of XAPI in the near future. But it doesn't matter which LMS you're with. The idea is that this technology allows you for additional control over the training that you're supposed to have, and that it might fit the needs of any skills gap or upskilling, reskilling that you might need in your organization.
Right on. So powerful stuff. I think XAPI tends to be the one where if you had to graph it on a chart where it would say the number of people who actually understand what it is versus the number of people who say it's valuable for the organization, you would see some interesting data points on that chart. So maybe if we have time, we can circle back and talk a little bit more about XAPI.
Sure.
All right, but let's make sure we cover our trends first. And the third and final trend here that we were talking about today is the virtual onboarding, shift to a more technology-driven onboarding process, right? So we know that the robots are still on our side, the systems still favor humans, And we still have to get the humans into those systems, though. So when it comes to HR, payroll, et cetera, onboarding somebody into the system, we are moving to a more virtual model. So it's not so much of an in-person thing anymore, where you receive a big packet of paperwork on day one, and then you spend all day writing information onto forms, which will then be handed to somebody in HR who will take everything you wrote and push it into a computer database anyway. So they still need the data. The organizations, they have to have it, especially when it comes to expectations, acceptance of terms, compliance issues. We all know that paper is going to a data entry person at the end of the day. So this makes the onboarding process is challenging to track. It's hard to manage. It's hard to retrieve, much less report on. So with an LMS, you can unleash some power. Josh, tell us how.
Yeah. So the approach that we're taking, Lee, is comes from the experience of many of our clients, and what has typically been happening offline. So when you onboard someone, you have a set of tasks, and those set of tasks need to be done, and they need to be checked off the list. So it just seemed very natural for us in the Tortal LMS to create something called the checklist type learning object. And what this is just a virtual representation of all the tasks that need to be completed for the learner to be successful in their onboarding. So how it works, the administrator sets the tasks, and the administrator decides if each task should have a text response or maybe a file response that they need to see, and even a signature response. So when that is set, the administrator launches the checklist, and the learner sees these things that need to be filled in and completed. And the learner starts either responding through a file, through text, or signing with their finger if they're using a mobile device, or with their mouse if they're using a computer. And they comply with saying, okay, I finished all these tasks, I finished this checklist, let's continue with onboarding. Once this is completed, the administrator can actually very easily report on it. They can get a PDF with the embedded signature, in which the learner complies with whatever was set. So it's a very powerful feature that we've seen very many clients of us using it. And it's a way of saying, you know what, you can virtual onboard someone even though they are remote. So goodbye to all those Excel sheets that really were lost after the fact. With this, you can have all the reporting needs that you have for your onboarding for multiple employees at the same time.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. I think that it's just madness to support a process where there's paper that is then has to be transferred into a technical storage device of some sort, a database or a local storage, or stored on a disk somewhere, so that you have paper versions and then you have ink and pencils and pens, and this process is an evolution, like not so much a trend, but an evolution towards saying that it's not completely propped up against technology. It's more propped up against improving business processes, because how often are you going to go back and refer to that initial paperwork that a person filled out the first time? And that's a question that you have to sort of explore in your organization. But you would say, you would want to pull that and only create the paper if and when it was absolutely necessary, as opposed to transferring it back and forth between paper and technology when you could just collect it here, like this tool that's been created. So
that's totally correctly. I mean, let's not forget the advantages of technology itself. This is trackable. You can have a date on it. The signature doesn't change. It can be reused. So, all of this is really something that's very powerful. I'm going to post a link to a video to understand this tool a little bit more, if it helps to our viewers. And this is where you can see how the tool works with a little bit of a more deeper explanation.
Yeah, that's a great video. It really does kind of run through the ins and outs of this tool very thoroughly in a very concise kind of way. All right, so speaking of kind of a wrap up or concise sort of digest here, so just kind of run back through what we covered in a very short amount of time here. Instructor-led training becoming virtual instructor-led training, physical logistics, again, the trackability, the reportability of the sessions and roster management, all of that being facilitated through technology. We talked about machine learning and artificial intelligence to enhance LMS tasks and free up those valuable human brains for more, strategic, intuitive sort of tasks, as opposed to just the mundane normalization of data and things that can be handled through technology, specifically in this case an LMS. And then finally, the virtual onboarding. The pain points of that task are easily mitigated through technology, especially when you can put something like a trackable, reportable checklist in line with other learning that a new employee would have to take anyway. So appreciate you helping us understand how to unleash that power, Josh. I do have one final question, though. If you were to take everything that we've talked about, including maybe trends that we didn't even cover today, and you were to say, what is the one takeaway from, the LMS as it exists in June of 2021? What is the one thing that you would leave people with if they were seeking to unleash power from their LMS?
I would definitely say, Lee, embrace technology. Whichever LMS you have, whichever LMS you're using, embrace the technology that's coming, because it's probably going to get here to stay. A few months ago, maybe a year, we saw gamification be a buzzword, and some people thought it was just a buzzword, but actually it went a step further, and it's here to stay. So I would say embrace it, learn from it, try and fit it in your training programs, try and use it, so that you can have a better edge on your training.
Awesome. Well said, Josh. Thanks so much for joining us today and for being part of the presentation, and everybody who joined in the session. We really appreciate you coming over. Now